back to working on some of the Ford truck parts this week. Got the power steering pump, and as you can see by the state of its greasiness, it's been very leaky. So is the gearbox, and the rag joint is completely shot on the truck. So I'm going to be rebuilding the pump and the gearbox with new seals and gaskets, and then we'll be replacing the rag joint just to kind of give a full revamp to that system as part of the steering. There's certainly a lot of slop in it going down the road, and I got to keep adding fluid every couple 100 miles, so it's just a matter of cleaning up a lot of this stuff and just hopefully fixing the leaks and getting the steering to be tightened up. Now when I pulled this out of the truck, I pulled it with the bracket still on it, just because it seemed easier because of these bolts going in behind the pulley seemed like they'd be kind of a pain in the butt in the truck, especially with the engine and everything in the way. So I just pulled it with the bracket, got that taken off. This thing's all gross and dirty too. We'll get that cleaned up, probably shoot some paint on it and stuff. But started taking it apart. It's got this nut on the hydraulic fitting. That's what holds the bracket on the back side with that little cutout, which works great. And then there's this next nut. I started taking this, and this is actually how the whole pump seems to be assembled together. It's going to be the tank rather coming off with that, so we'll finish taking that apart. Looks like we got some kind of seal here on the threads, which would make sense. Like a metal washer gasket thing. I see all the dirt and stuff on that screen. Yeah, there's definitely some, probably rubber from just crappy old hose that have been pumping through here and getting clogged in that screen. Springs. Oh. Pump housing. Orifice plate. There are actual gears to be pumping in there. Alright, just gotta set this back together because I wanted to double check where everything's at. So there's these pins that pass through to line everything up. And I'm just kind of looking at witness marks to see where everything was at. So, you know, because we can be possibly 180 off, which wouldn't do us any good. But it was on there like that. So this comes off. I got a pressure relief valve in here for recirculating. Got our pressure side ports, and this would be our recirculation port. So and this is our pump vanes. So as this spins, you can see these vanes expand, so that's where they're going to be pulling fluid in, and then they go around and they end up compressing, so that's where pumping fluid out. Weirdly enough, there's these two sets of holes that line up where you can actually put it on wrong. But they don't fit as snug. Or it does that. Alright, half an hour later after putting this thing back together, when you flip this thing up, for the two holes, there's the set that is smaller for doweling. That's the set that goes on there. And then we've got this real nice witness mark with the notch that lines up with the notch in the pump here. So that's easy enough to find a way to put back together. And then if you do what I just did and blast the whole thing apart, all of these are angled and they sit in a way where both sides ride on the bore. It makes sense that way, because if they're flipped around the other way, you only got one of them riding on the bore. So you should have contact on both sides, then you know you got to put it in right. Or do what I did and be taking pictures as you go. So now we've got this shaft in here, so it looks like I'm at the point I need to have the pulley taken off. We've also got an O-ring on the outside that needs to come out, and then this gasket on the surface that needs to come off as well so it can get replaced. Now there are tools designed for removing these pulleys. Pretty sure you can even rent them at like a parts store. I don't have one or wanted to go to the parts store, so I made do with a sketchy setup in the press and a bearing puller. Worked pretty good actually. Oh man. Oh, it's because the thing was bent. Well, I'd say that bearing's plenty snug. The orientation of this top piece I was checking because it's got the basically inlet for the fluid right there. However, there's also in the main housing a oil hole that travels down to meet the seal here, and I think that's just to let fluid cycle back out, and it's orientated like this where this notch right here is the top of the pump, so it's obviously up towards the top. But the way that gasket's made is that hole ends up in a slot, and you gotta line this hole in this housing piece up with that hole also, or it can't go anywhere. And there we have it, the pump is rebuilt. Now I should address that there's these extra 3 washers. These do not show up on the exploded view of this particular pump. This kit also fits different year pumps and probably slightly different styles. This rubber one here is the only one that I wasn't really sure about. I thought maybe it would go between the hydraulic fitting out the back, the high pressure stud here, and the tank. However, it wasn't a great fit, like it's loose on here, which made me think that that wouldn't make sense for there at all. And that's why I used RTV, because there was a paper gasket that fit that position correctly. And that's on the exploded view, that's what it looks like there, versus there was this rubber clad metal one that was on their stock. So I don't know, I didn't want to just trust the paper gasket, so that's why I put RTV on there. I put it on the from the internal pump housing to the gasket, and the gasket to the tank, and the tank to the nut, to just make sure that we don't have a leak back there. And this was the part number for that particular kit for that particular pump. There is a different style pump that can go on some of these. However, this is the one I needed. I got it from LMC Truck, but obviously it's a Dennis Carpenter number, as well as a few other places I've seen online where you can get them too. It's absolutely gorgeous out here for February, but I still need to get the power steering box off of the truck before I put the pump and stuff back on, but I wanted to go over a couple things I had to do to get it out. Now the hoses to the pump, where the pump was down here, were all kind of rot and stuff, so I ended up cutting the rubber one. This truck's got this line that weaves back and forth. It's just hard line acting as a cooler. There you can see it better. But then on the other side there, the fittings up on the box are right down there, and I had to pull the master cylinder like out of the way as far as I could to be able to get a wrench back in there. I still gotta find the bolts to pull from the frame and then get the steering coupler unhooked, but then we'll be able to get that box pulled out and do a rebuild on it. Yes, it's February. Should have started with pressure washing. Well, I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but it's significantly better down in there. I mean, that cross member even looks halfway decent, and that thing was just caked. Because basically everything looked like this nut beforehand, just covered in grease. You could say that reg joint was shot. Clearly somebody had been messing with it before because it had some different bolts stuck in it. Oh man, look at that thing. Just wrecked. I'm surprised the steering wasn't more sloppy. Oh, it's so much nicer with all the crap cleaned off of this. Well, we'll get it taken apart because we got a whole seal kit to put in it. Yeah, right there. Alright, I didn't record taking this apart, largely because I didn't know how things were going to come apart to begin with, but it actually doesn't look that complicated. It feels complicated, especially when all of these little ball bearings decide to start falling out, but really they're just the bearings that ride in this spiral worm gear that also are inside this housing. As long as you don't lose any, you just make sure you catch them. There's an easy way to put them back together. But mostly it's just get this thing taken apart. I think the biggest thing worth noting is that when this valve comes out of the hydraulics, you can see this nut and you really don't notice this collar. There's a set screw on here. That's what holds the collar. I didn't notice that right away and it was a pain in the butt. It's just this super tiny little set screw. So make sure you pull that out and then you can just use a punch to spin this and get it disassembled. And this seems like it's as far as it can be taken apart. I mean, there's definitely like a second piece in here somehow, but I'm not quite seeing how it comes apart. I see there's another notch in here like this also on threads, but it's got this pin which doesn't go through. I think that's kind of a one-way assembly. And as far as I can tell, there might be one single O-ring in there out of the kit. And this wasn't a problem with it to start. Everything I had with this about why it's taken apart is leaking. So that's going to be all of our external seals and our shaft seals. Yeah, I absolutely hate these. Because now, just to be able to get it down this far, it's like super stretched. I don't know, I checked online, like supposedly these things shrink back up. I'm just looking at it's going to be a huge pain in the butt to get it into the housing, but I don't see how else you could do it. I mean, I'm putting it on like a piston ring where you got to like get it started on one side and then just like let it go around, but it's rough because I can't put the first one on and then like have it run over the whole thing because I got to like put it into each groove as I go and work it down, and it just seems kind of inevitable that they're going to get a lot of stretch. But I don't know, we'll see how it goes putting the whole thing together. Put just a little oil on these. And I guess we'll see how it goes. Yeah, that's a good sign. Alright, I guess they squish back up decent. Now we got our lock collar that goes on. Now there's probably a torque spec for this, but I'm just going off of where I can see it started to smear when I tried to take it off without the set screw removed. So we're at least back to where it was from the factory. And mostly it's just the play has gone out of it. Still spins super free. Now we need the seals for the input end. And that is the thicker seal, a snap ring, and then like a dust seal, or whatever. Like everything on here is like double sealed, even the big part of the shaft on the bottom. So this will end up going in there. And then there's a groove above that that'll retain this seal in. And then this one will go in on top. But I'm just going to find a socket that's pretty close to the OD size that'll fit in there to be able to hammer it in. Put just a little oil on the lip part of the seal. Snap rings in. The square rubber O-ring. I can switch to her housing. Same thing here, we're gonna have this stack up of seals and a snap ring. Now this one's got like 2 metal spacers, and then the seals, they are slightly different than the old ones. The old one had 2 that were the same, and the height looks slightly different, so I'm not sure how that's gonna pan out here, but we'll see. That's because the new setup has 1 seal that is thicker. However, it's also got a seal with a step on here, which might fit inside of one of these. Yeah, it does. So that probably takes up some of the height. But also the seals on the other part that we just put in there still was some space behind the snap ring. So maybe this just sits a little tighter to snap ring. And the kit does come with an exploded view. Now it shows 2 different housings here for the steering box, but it looks like all the parts are probably the same on the inside kind of thing as far as the seals. Alright, well, of the 2 seals for this end, we've got a double lip seal, which looks like a normal oil seal, and then we've got one that's just a single. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the double lip one is going to be our first seal to go in. The old ones both were double lip, but one was a little bit thicker, so it's also, we got a thick thin, so. Alright, now since it's spacer seal spacer, I'm going to go with the thick one in first, because I believe that this second seal needs to be installed this way with the lip up, so then the spacer acts as the interface to the snap ring. And yep, that spacing works out good. You got seal, spacer, seal, spacer. Snap ring is in. Now the outside of this piece gets these two seals. So as you can see, the rubber one fits inside of the Teflon one, so we'll put the rubber one on first, then the Teflon. Never mind, it's not the square one, it's the round one. Alright, now this part I am not 100% sure about what's the correct way to assemble it, because I know this has to go in like that, which means we're not going to have access to this spot, so that's got to get assembled, and that's how the ball bearings go in. So I'm guessing we've got to slip these together and then install the bearings, which there's these little half round deals there that has this opening in the top. Maybe we just start dropping them in? I don't know. Find out. Seems to be doing something. I literally have no idea if this is working correctly or not. I may be able to put more in. So I got one left. Just need to get some space in there. Alright, now it's in. Okay, let's put the cap on. Seems to be correct. Alright, now the way that this engages, we've got the shaft that goes in here, and the way that that's shaped, it has to go in after this part is in. Oh. Yeah, make sure we got our seal on there. That's good. Alright, turn this, kind of get the teeth lined up. You can see that this part's tipped back at a pretty hard angle. Need to, yeah, there we go, get it twisted over right.
Oh, good thing I checked anyway. Had to take that back part and check anyway because I forgot that O-ring right there. So this little guy. Alright, now that I got it back lined up, we gotta screw this part in to pull this cap down. Got our O-ring in there already. That'll get us down close here. Oh wait, the bracket needs to go on. Now this part we've got is our backlash adjustment. So, you know, depending on what we turn here, like I'm wiggling back and forth and seeing that the bottom's not moving. So I can turn it through. You know, so that's our backlash right now. We should be able to tighten that up. Seems to be making it worse. Doesn't seem to be changing a lot. It's definitely less of it on that end. It doesn't seem to be adjusting the way I expect it to. It is also a, what, 50-year-old gearbox at this point. Ain't much though, it's very little movement, so we'll go with that. I'm sure there'll be some play in the steering wheel no matter what. So, I mean, this little bit here should be minimal. So that's the steering box rebuilt. Honestly, when I started taking it apart, it felt really daunting. Once I actually had it all the way apart, it was like, nah, this is actually pretty simple. So, don't get discouraged by it. I mean, it's a lot easier to put some seals in this and get the leaking to quit. And honestly, if you were just after a leak, it'd probably be just this lower steering arm end and maybe up at the input side as far as changing the seals to get any leaks to quit. However, you kind of got to take it apart to be able to get to those. I don't think you're going to be saving yourself any time trying to pick the seals out one by one without having access. It's probably going to actually be more difficult anyway. So just taking it apart, knowing them little ball bearings are going to fall everywhere, kind of a thing. Like, it's just a part of the process, but really it's quite simple, and you got that nice exploded view that comes with the kit anyway. And for this particular kit, this was the part numbers, so, and everything seemed to fit. Like I said, there's only one seal out of that whole kit that I didn't use, which is just one that I didn't come across when taking it apart. And I believe it would have been if we would have continued to take that valve apart anymore. I didn't see an easy way that it came apart, and I didn't want to start messing with it and actually wreck something. So. And, you know, obviously the rag joint gets replaced. It's kind of interesting. It's this plastic now. And then it comes with these other clips. That look like they go on here in some way that locks some stuff together. I'm not sure yet. I haven't got that far. But it's definitely interesting. You know, the rag joint's completely gone. It's this plastic piece, whether it's nylon or whatever it is. Should be a massive difference in the steering feel just with that part alone. I'm having a real heck of a time trying to put this back in. I finally fought it up from the bottom, which is the way it came out. It kind of came out like a pain in the butt too. Got the kind of engaged with the steering column, but in order to do that I had to pull the whole steering column loose, which was pulling a cover off underneath the steering column, the 2 bolts there, the 4 on the firewall, and then I really couldn't move it a whole lot because there's a clamp on the engine side that kind of clamps over the whole thing. So that's got to get loosened up, and then it'll only move a little bit, and then there's a plate on the firewall that the shifter bottoms out against. So it's really kind of stuck, and then I've been trying to get that plate off. There's 3 bolts. I got 2 out, and then I went to jack the truck up to just kind of check and make sure that like steering side to side, it was actually centered on the box versus the steering wheel. And just jacking that up enough, it was enough I was able to rotate the steering wheel to straight when the tires are sitting straight here on the ground. So at least I'm close. And that should be, I mean, at least where it was at before, kind of a thing. Like the cab must have pulled away just enough to get it off the splines where put a little tension on you and you hear it like kind of ratchet along. So that's, I don't know, now I gotta put them 2 bolts back in. I'm gonna kind of just go with it where it's at, because really if I wanted this to be a lot easier, I probably need to pull the brake booster, and that does not look like a fun or easy job either, just because there's either 4 bolts in the back of the booster or 4 on the firewall, but then you still gotta unhook the pedal, and none of that is where you can actually get at it very easy because it's all like tucked in behind a bunch of other stuff. So I'm willing to accept where it's at. If the steering wheel is off a little bit, we'll see how much it annoys me, but it can already tell like the slop in the steering is nothing compared to what it was. So it'll be a heck of a lot better, but man, that box is so heavy to try to move around. Alright, never mind. You don't even need to jack the truck up to get it to ratchet a little bit. Just make sure you got your bolt all the way out. And if you turn the wheel hard enough, it'll ratchet over the splines. I'm sure that's real great for the splines, but also that new rag joint that's not a rag, use the old bolt because it comes with one that's got like a 9/16 hex head on it, and you basically can't put a socket on it. So the old one is shrunk down to a 7/16 12 point. Works a lot better. Gotta put the power steering lines back on before I get the brake booster. It had all this cloth wrapped around the high pressure line here up to roughly here from the fitting, and there's absolutely nothing that looks wrong with that. So I wonder if that fitting wasn't tight enough and it was leaking and somebody thought it was the line, but it's kind of weird. I try to clean this crud off of here to make sure this thing actually cools instead of just being caked full of muck. Guess we'll find out pretty quick when we put it back together whether or not it was actually leaking out of the line. These lines are available though to buy, even this cooler section, so. Well, we're trying to top off the battery right now. You know, -20 for a week and a half really takes a toll on the battery when it's sitting outside. But I was able to get the truck fired up. Doesn't look like we've got any leaks, at least nothing as bad as what was before. But I mean, really you'll have to wait till some more snow melts and the salt gets off the road before we get to drive around and really test it long term. But I was able to get it filled enough, fired up, go lock to lock a few times, and I mean it works like it's supposed to, so I didn't screw anything up while I was in there. And yeah, hopefully we just got our leaks fixed because it was really a mess under there. I mean, I pressure washed a lot of it, but it's still kind of a mess. I mean, this whole truck could use a bath. Actually, I don't think I've washed this thing since I've owned it, and it's been almost a year. Well, we'll get to that. I want to buff the whole truck too, so it's going to have to get washed before that. But it's nice to get this project done though. So moving on to more things. We've still got plenty of other stuff we need to do to upgrade this truck.